A long time ago, in the quiet village of Okan, there was a small market where people gathered every day to buy and sell their goods. The market was always full of life, with traders calling out to customers, children laughing as they played, and the smells of fresh food filling the air. But above everything else, one thing was known and talked about the most: Mama Abini's Jollof rice. Mama Abini had a little shop tucked into the corner of the market. It was a humble setup with a few wooden benches, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the food. Her Jollof rice was the best anyone had ever tasted. It wasn't just a meal, it was a sensation. Whether there was a wedding, a naming ceremony, or a village festival, Mama Abini's food was always recommended. Everyone wanted her to cook, and no event was complete without her famous Jollof rice. Her rice had a taste that made you close your eyes with every bite, the perfect blend of rich tomatoes, onions, and her secret spices. The meat she served with the rice was always tender and full of flavor. People said her food had a special magic that couldn't be explained. Word about her cooking spread quickly, and soon people from nearby villages started visiting just to try her party Jollof. No one could recall exactly when Mama Abini came to Okan. It seemed as though she had always been there, blending into the village life so well that her arrival was a mystery. Over time, she became a part of the fabric of Okan. She was quiet and humble, with a smile that welcomed everyone, but it was her food that made her unforgettable. But with Mama Abini's growing fame, something strange began to happen around her stall. For as long as anyone could remember, the village dogs had always barked whenever they passed by her mama put. But lately their barking had grown louder, more aggressive. It wasn't just one or two dogs anymore. All the dogs in Okan would gather around her stall, barking furiously as she served her food. Their growls and howls were so intense that it began to unsettle the villagers. At first, people joked about it. Maybe they just want a taste, someone would say. But the laughter soon died down when even the scraps Mama Abini threw to the dogs were left untouched. The dogs wouldn't eat her food, no matter how hungry they were. Instead, they barked louder and louder, almost as if they were trying to warn the villagers about something no one could see. It wasn't just the dogs that acted strangely. There was also a madman who wandered through the village. He was harmless, but he was known for his odd behavior. Every day he would walk by Mama Abini's stall, shaking his head and muttering to himself. Whenever someone offered him a plate of Mama Abini's food, he would refuse angrily, waving his hands as if the food disgusted him. No one knew why he reacted that way, but it added to the growing sense of unease. Mama Abini, however, seemed completely unfazed by it all. She went about her business, serving her Jollof rice with the same warmth and kindness she had always shown. The villagers still loved her food, but they couldn't ignore the strangeness surrounding her stall. The barking dogs, the madman's refusal to eat, and the fact that no one could remember exactly when she had arrived in Okan. All of it made people wonder. One day, as a group of men sat eating, one of them asked, "Why do the dogs always bark like that around Mama Abini's place?" Another man shrugged. "I don't know, but it's strange. Even that madman won't eat her food." The first man frowned. "Maybe it's just the smell of the food, but it's getting worse. You'd think the dogs would get tired of barking by now." Mama Abini's food was as delicious as ever, but the mystery surrounding her was growing with every passing day. Mama Abini, as everyone in Okan called her, was known for her incredible Jollof rice, but her real name wasn't Abini at all. It was Yamisi. When she first arrived in the village, she had told the people with her usual soft smile to call her Abini. She explained that she had a daughter named Abini as well, a young woman who lived far away in the city. "She's busy with her life there," Mama Abini would say whenever someone asked about her daughter. "One day, maybe she'll visit." But as the years went by, no one ever saw Mama Abini's daughter Abini. In fact, no one ever saw any of Mama Abini's family members. No relatives came to visit her, and she never spoke of anyone else from her past. The villagers noticed, of course, but they didn't ask too many questions. Mama Abini had blended into the village life so well that it felt like she had always been there. Most people didn't care much about her personal life anyway. What they cared about was her Jollof rice. The taste of her food was all that mattered to them. Every market day, Mama Abini would arrive early, her pot steaming and ready to serve. By midday, her stall was always packed with customers. mostly men, eager to fill their bellies with her famous jollof rice. Some of the men became so obsessed with her cooking that they would leave their wives' meals untouched at home. Instead of eating what was prepared for them, they would skip breakfast and even lunch, saving their appetites for Mama Abini's jollof. Their wives complained, of course, but the men didn't seem to care. The magic of Mama Abini's food had a hold on them that no one could explain. "She put something special in that rice," one of the men would say, patting his full stomach after eating a large plate. "Nothing else tastes like it." The women in the village grumbled among themselves, but even they couldn't deny that Mama Abini's jollof rice was something different. It was richer, tastier, and somehow comforting, in a way that regular food wasn't. It brought people together. At weddings, naming ceremonies, and every celebration in the village, Mama Abini's food was a must-have. But while the villagers were happy with her, not everyone seemed to welcome her presence. The dogs in the neighborhood, especially the ones near the market, never liked her. Mama Abini herself seemed completely unbothered by it all. She would serve her food with a calm smile, never reacting to the dogs growling or the madman who would shake his head and refuse to eat her food. She carried on as if everything was normal, as if she didn't hear the noise or feel the growing unease among some of the villagers. But while the men lined up eagerly for her jollof rice and the women grumbled about their husbands' neglect of home-cooked meals, the barking dogs remained a constant, unsettling presence in the background. No one knew why the dogs seemed to dislike Mama Abini so much, but the villagers didn't care enough to find out. They were too focused on their next plate of jollof rice. However, Kemi, a young woman in the village, couldn't shake the strange feeling that something wasn't right. The dogs, the mad man, the absence of any family members, it all made her wonder if there was more to Mama Abini than just her delicious cooking. And so, while the rest of the village continued to enjoy Mama Abini's food without question, Kemi decided to keep a closer eye on the woman who had become such an important part of Oken. She didn't know what she would find, but she couldn't ignore the strange feeling that something was wrong. It was a warm afternoon in Oken when Kemi spotted Mama Abini returning from the village August meeting. The meeting had gathered all the women in the village, and Mama Abini, as usual, had blended right in, smiling and chatting like everyone else. But something strange happened as she walked back through the market. 2 dogs, who were usually friendly and never barked at anyone, suddenly started barking furiously at her. Mama Abini wasn't carrying any food with her, just dressed in her fine clothes, looking as though she had just come from the meeting like all the other women. Kemi knew those dogs well. They belonged to her neighbor, and they were known for being calm and gentle. But now, they were growling and snapping at Mama Abini like they sensed something wrong. Kemi watched in confusion as Mama Abini simply walked past the dogs, not even looking at them, as if she didn't hear the noise at all. The dogs continued barking until she disappeared around the corner, and even then, they stood there, growling in the direction she had gone. That night, Kemi couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. The dogs were never aggressive, so why had they reacted like that to Mama Abini? It wasn't the first time Kemi had noticed something odd about her. The dogs always barked around her stall, but this time was different. Mama Abini wasn't even cooking, and yet the dogs had behaved as if they were scared or warned of something. Feeling uneasy, Kemi decided to visit her close friend, Adana. She needed to talk to someone about what she had seen. Later that evening, Kemi found herself sitting in Adana's small house, explaining everything. "Adana, I saw her today, after the village meeting," Kemi said, her voice low. The dogs started barking at her. They were barking like they wanted to attack. Adana raised an eyebrow. She wasn't selling food. No, nothing. She was just walking back from the meeting. And you know those dogs, they're not aggressive. I think something's really wrong, Adana. Adana sighed, folding her arms. You've always had a curious mind, Kemi. But you're right, it is strange. The dogs don't usually act like that. I think we need to watch her, Kemi said quietly. I have a feeling there's more to this. Adana hesitated. Do you really want to get involved in this? She's Mama Abini. Everyone loves her food. Kemi shook her head. That's exactly why we need to find out what's going on. Everyone is too focused on her jollof rice, but what if there's something we don't know? Adana nodded slowly. All right, we'll watch her. but we have to be careful." Over the next few days, Kemi and Adana kept a close eye on Mama Abini, trying not to raise any suspicion. At first, everything seemed normal. Mama Abini went about her business as usual, serving her famous Jollof rice, greeting her customers with that same warm smile. The dogs still barked around her, but nothing new seemed to happen. Then, one evening, something changed. It was late afternoon, and the market was beginning to wind down. The usual crowd had already eaten, and the other vendors were packing up their goods. Kemi and Adana were watching from a distance when they noticed Mama Abini closing her stall earlier than usual. Normally she would wait until the last customer had been served, but today she packed up quickly, looking around as if checking if anyone was watching. Kemi nudged Adana. "Look, she's leaving early. She never does that." They watched as Mama Abini gathered her things and began walking. But instead of heading home the usual way, she took a different path, one that led towards the forest at the edge of the village. Kemi's heart raced. "Where is she going? That's not the way to her house." "Let's follow her," Adana whispered. The two friends hurried after Mama Abini, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't notice them. They moved quietly, hiding behind trees and bushes as they followed her deeper into the forest. It wasn't a place many villagers went. The thick trees and undergrowth made it dark and eerie, even during the day. Mama Abini walked quickly, her footsteps light as she disappeared deeper into the trees. Kemi's pulse quickened. She had never followed anyone into the forest before, and the air felt thick with mystery and unease. After what felt like forever, Mama Abini finally stopped. Kemi and Adana ducked behind a large bush, peeking through the branches. Ahead of them, they saw an old, crumbling hut. The roof was sagging and the walls were covered in moss. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. Mama Abini approached the door and knocked softly. Kemi and Adana held their breath, watching closely. After a few moments, the door creaked open and an elderly woman stepped out. She was much older than Mama Abini, with deep wrinkles lining her face and a hunched back. The two women spoke quietly, their voices too low for Kemi and Adana to hear. Kemi squinted, trying to make out what was happening. Then the old woman reached into her pocket and handed Mama Abini a small dark bottle. Mama Abini took it without hesitation, slipping it into her bag and nodding her thanks. The two women exchanged a few more words before Mama Abini turned and began walking back toward the village. Kemi and Adana exchanged nervous glances. What had they just witnessed? Why had Mama Abini gone to meet this strange old woman in the forest? And what was in that bottle? As Mama Abini disappeared down the path, Kemi whispered, "What do you think that was?" "I don't know," Adana replied, her voice trembling. "But it's not good." Kemi's mind was racing. Something about this whole situation felt wrong, very wrong. She and Adana knew they had to find out more, but they couldn't do it alone. "We need to figure out what she's hiding," Kemi said firmly. "There's something strange going on, and I'm not stopping until I find out what it is." Kemi and Adana couldn't shake the unsettling feeling from their discovery in the forest. But they knew they couldn't just leave things hanging. They needed to know more about what Mama Abini was really up to. So, one afternoon they came up with a plan. They decided to sneak into Mama Abini's stall after the market had closed for the day. The next evening, when the market had emptied and Mama Abini had gone home, Kemi and Adana crept quietly toward her stall. The night air was cool, and their footsteps were soft against the ground as they approached the small wooden structure. Kemi's heart raced as they slipped inside. They searched carefully, making sure not to disturb anything that would reveal their presence. After a few minutes, they found it. The small, dark bottle that Mama Abini had received from the old woman in the forest. Kemi held the bottle in her hands, turning it over carefully. "What do you think it is?" Adana whispered. Kemi unscrewed the top and sniffed it cautiously. The liquid inside smelled faintly of herbs. She tipped the bottle slightly, letting a few drops fall onto her finger. "It smells like medicine," Kemi said, confused. The two friends exchanged glances. "Medicine?" Adana asked, frowning. "For what?" The next day, Kemi went straight to her mother and told her everything about the bottle, the old woman in the forest, and how they had sneaked into Mama Abini's stall to investigate. Her mother listened carefully before letting out a small laugh. "Oh, Kemi, There's nothing to worry about, she said, shaking her head. That old woman is a healer. She's lived on the edge of the village for years. People go to her when they need medicine for all sorts of things. It's not strange at all for someone like Mama Abini, who cooks so much every day, to need medicine for joint pain. Kemi blinked, feeling a little foolish. Joint pain? Her mother nodded. Of course. Cooking that much food is hard work. Mama Abini probably just needs it to help with the strain on her body. Kemi sighed with relief. So there's no secret then? None that I know of, her mother replied with a smile. When Kemi told Adana what her mother had said, the two of them laughed at how suspicious they had been. I guess we were overthinking it, Adana said. She's just an ordinary woman who makes great food. No mystery. Kemi agreed, and the two friends decided to let the matter rest. After all, Mama Abini's jollof rice was loved by the entire village. Maybe they had been wrong to think there was something strange about her. They had found no real secret, and the dog's barking and the madman's refusal to eat her food seemed less important now. Just when they had decided to let the sleeping dogs lie, something unexpected happened. The madman's warning. The madman had been a part of the village for as long as anyone could remember. He wasn't dangerous, but he was known for his strange habits, walking through the market, shaking his head, and mumbling angrily to himself. Most people ignored him, but there was one thing everyone noticed. He always refused to eat Mama Abini's food. Every time he passed her stall, he would stop, shake his head violently, and mutter under his breath. When someone offered him a plate of her jollof rice, he would wave his hands in the air, refusing it with an intensity that no one could understand. The villagers laughed it off, chalking it up to his madness, but Kemi couldn't stop thinking about it. Even after she had dismissed her suspicions about Mama Abini, the madman's behavior lingered in her mind. Why was he so adamant about not eating from her stall? One afternoon, unable to ignore her curiosity any longer, Kemi decided to approach the madman. She spotted him standing near the market, his wild eyes darting around as he mumbled to himself. "Baba," Kemi called softly, walking up to him slowly. The madman stopped mumbling for a moment and looked at her, his eyes sharp despite the madness that seemed to cloud them. "Why don't you eat from Mama Abini's stall?" Kemi asked cautiously. "Do you know something we don't?" The madman's face twisted in fear. He shook his head violently, his hands waving in the air. "No! No! Don't eat it! Bad! Bad!" he shouted, his voice filled with anger and fear. Kemi stepped back, startled by his outburst. Before she could say anything else, the madman turned and ran off, leaving her standing there in confusion. When she told Adana about it later, her friend laughed. "You're taking the words of a madman seriously now?" "I don't know," Kemi replied, still unsettled by the encounter. "But something's wrong. I can feel it." It was a sunny afternoon when a young traveling merchant arrived in Okan. He had come from a distant town, far beyond the hills and rivers that bordered the village, bringing with him goods from all corners of the region. As he set up his small stall in the marketplace, he noticed the bustling crowd around one particular food stall. Curious, the merchant asked a nearby villager, "What's happening over there?" The villager smiled. "That's Mama Abini's jollof rice stall. People come from all over just to taste her food. If you're hungry, you should try it." The merchant's interest was piqued. "Mama Abini, you say? What's so special about her food?" "Her jollof rice is the best in all of Okan. No one else cooks like her. She's famous for it," the villager replied, gesturing toward the busy stall. "Go on, try it. You won't regret it." Eager to taste the famous jollof, the merchant made his way through the crowd and approached Mama Abini's stall. As he drew closer, something strange happened. His heart skipped a beat, and a sense of shock washed over him. The woman standing behind the stall, serving food with a calm and warm smile, looked eerily familiar. The merchant froze in his tracks, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It can't be," he muttered under his breath. He stepped forward, studying her face more closely. "Excuse me?" he said slowly, his voice trembling. "Are you Mama Abini?" The woman looked up, her smile unwavering. "Yes, I am. Would you like some jollof rice?" The merchant stared at her in disbelief. "It's impossible," he whispered. You died years ago." Mama Abini's smile faltered for just a brief moment, but she said nothing and continued serving the next customer in line. The merchant couldn't contain himself any longer. "I knew you. You had a Jollof rice shop in another town very far from here. I was one of your regular customers," he said, his voice rising with emotion. "But you died years ago. I was there at your funeral. You were in a car accident on your way to buy food supplies. How can you be here, looking exactly the same as you did back then?" The crowd around Mama Abini's stall fell silent. People turned to look at the stranger, their faces full of confusion and curiosity. "You haven't aged a day," the merchant continued, his voice shaking. "It's been years. Your daughter, Abini, she was just a girl, 16 years old. But now she's grown, married, with children of her own. I saw her not too long ago in my travels. How can you still look like this?" The villagers stood frozen, murmuring among themselves. Some looked at Mama Abini with suspicion, while others were too shocked to speak. Mama Abini's expression remained calm, but there was a heaviness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She looked at the merchant for a long moment, then without saying a word, turned and walked toward her shop. Her movements were slow and deliberate, as if she knew something that no one else did. The crowd watched as she stepped into her shop and closed the door behind her. They waited, expecting her to return, to explain the stranger's wild claims. But Mama Abini didn't come back. The door remained shut, and the air around the marketplace seemed to grow heavy with uncertainty. The merchant stood there, his heart beating fast, as he further narrated the story to those present. He had been certain it was her, Mama Abini, the woman who had cooked the best Jollof rice in the town where he had lived. He had seen her body after the car accident. He had attended her funeral, alongside others who had loved her food and respected her, and he had seen her daughter Abini crying her eyes out. Yet here she was, alive, unchanged, and serving Jollof rice in a village miles away. The villagers began to whisper. "Is it true?" one asked. "Could she really have died?" Another shook their head in disbelief. "But she's been here for years. How could this be?" Kemi, who had been watching the scene unfold from a distance, felt a chill run down her spine. The unease she had felt about Mama Abini all this time came flooding back. The barking dogs, the madman's warnings, it all made sense now. Something wasn't right about Mama Abini, but what could it be? Hours passed, and still, Mama Abini did not emerge from her shop. The villagers knocked on the door, called out to her, but there was no response. The door remained locked, and the windows were dark. They pushed the door open but didn't find her inside. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. From that day on, Mama Abini was never seen again. Her famous Jollof rice stall stood empty, and no one could explain what had happened. Some said she had returned to the spirit world where she belonged, while others believed she had fled, hiding from the truth. But one thing was certain. The mystery of Mama Abini had left the village of Okan in a state of confusion and fear. The merchant, shaken by what he had seen, left the village the next morning, never to return. He told no one else about what had happened, and he never spoke of Mama Abini again. After Mama Abini's sudden disappearance, the village of Okan was never quite the same. Her shop, once filled with laughter, warmth, and the irresistible smell of Jollof rice, now stood eerily quiet. The villagers couldn't believe it. One moment, Mama Abini was serving her food as she always had, and the next, she was gone, vanishing without a trace. In the days following her disappearance, the villagers gathered in small groups, speculating about what had happened. The story of the traveling merchant, who had claimed that Mama Abini had died years ago, spread like wildfire. His words echoed in everyone's minds. "She hasn't aged a day." The more people talked about it, the more unsettling it became. "She must have been a ghost," one of the elders said quietly as they sat around the village square. "How else could she have lived here all these years without aging? Spirits often take on familiar forms to blend in." "But she cooked real food," a younger villager argued. "People ate it every day. Ghosts don't cook Jollof rice, do they?" "Maybe she was cursed," another villager suggested, his voice trembling. "Maybe she was trapped between the world of the living and the dead, forced to wander and serve food to those who didn't know her secret. The speculation grew wilder with each passing day. Some villagers believed that Mama Abini had been sent as a warning from the ancestors. Others thought she had been using some form of dark magic to stay young, disguising herself as a living person while hiding her true nature. The fact that her daughter Abini was now a grown woman with children only made the story more bizarre. How could a mother look exactly the same after so many years, while her daughter had aged? Kemi, who had been watching everything unfold from the very beginning, felt torn. She remembered all the times she had seen Mama Abini in the market, smiling and serving food as if she were just another villager. But the madman's warnings, the dogs barking, and now the merchant's revelation, it all pointed to something far more sinister. "What do you think happened to her?" Adana asked Kemi one afternoon, as they stood outside the now empty stall. Kemi shook her head slowly. "I don't know, Adana. But I don't think we'll ever know the full truth. It's like she was here one moment, and gone the next." The stall that had once been the busiest place in the market now stood untouched, a haunting reminder of the mystery that lingered. No one dared go near it. The villagers treated it with the same respect they would give a shrine, whispering stories about Mama Abini as if she were some kind of spirit who had lived among them. Children, too young to understand the details, heard the tale from their parents and began to call her the ghost Jollof seller. They dared each other to go close to the stall at night, claiming that if you stood too close, you could still smell the Jollof rice cooking, even though no one had been inside the shop since Mama Abini's disappearance. The dogs, which had once barked endlessly at Mama Abini's stall, no longer gathered there. It was as if they knew the source of their discomfort had left. The market, though still bustling with activity, felt different. There was a void where Mama Abini's stall used to be. The villagers no longer talked openly about her, but her absence was felt in every corner of Okan. Her story became a legend in the village, growing more fantastical with each retelling. Some said she had been an immortal spirit, cursed to wander from village to village. Others claimed she was a witch, casting spells on her food to keep herself young forever. But no matter how the story changed, one thing remained constant. No one could explain how she had disappeared so suddenly, or why she had never aged. Kemi, despite her curiosity, knew she would have to let the mystery rest. She had spent so much time wondering about Mama Abini, but now, all she had were unanswered questions. One evening, as the sun was setting and the market was quiet, Kemi stood in front of the empty stall, lost in thought. The once bustling space was now overgrown with weeds, the door to the shop locked and untouched. "I wonder if she'll ever come back," Adana said, standing beside her. Kemi sighed. "Maybe, but even if she does, I don't think we'll ever really know who or what she was." The two friends stood in silence, watching as the last rays of the sun disappeared behind the trees. The air around them felt heavy, as though the village itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Mama Abini's stall remained empty, a quiet reminder of the mystery that had once captivated the village of Okan. Her story, told as the tale of the ghost Jollof seller, would live on in the minds of the villagers for generations to come.